Hey everyone, this is Scott Small, Director of CTI at Tidal Cyber, coming at you with quick guidance on how you can use Tidal's free Community Edition platform to save time in surfacing relevant detection analytics directly related to the TTP intelligence provided in CISA's advisory on BianLan Ransomware, released just yesterday afternoon, May 16th, 2023. The alert is packed with details, including MITRE attack technique mappings, and most importantly for detection engineering purposes, specific commands that CISA partners observed associated with BianLan intrusions in the wild. We're going to use a combination of the details contained in the alert itself and pivoting in Community Edition to quickly surface open source detection analytics you could consider deploying in your own environment directly related to the ransomware activity discussed in the report. So here in Community Edition, you're seeing two side-by-side TTP matrices. The one in blue on the left is our original BianLan technique set that we published back in November of 2022. And on the right in green are the technique mappings derived from the CISA alert. I'm going to narrow down just to display the labeled techniques here on the matrix. So one thing that stood out to me as I was reviewing the recent reports was the use of the disable or modify tools technique, commonly used technique associated with ransomware and much other activity recently in the wild. And we can see on the right-hand side in the technique use column some details associated with BianLan's implementation of this technique. So we can look for its use or disabling of Windows Defender and come down a little bit further in the report to see some of the specific commands that BianLan was recently observed using in conducting this technique. So here we can see that it used the deployment image servicing and management or DISM executable file to remove Windows Defender. This is going to be an extremely useful detail as we start to pivot into looking for some specific analytics we could deploy. So here we can see a huge benefit of Tidal's Community Edition in that it aggregates numerous defensive and offensive security resources all aligned with MITRE attack techniques. So if we pivot into the Sigma analytics, we can see there are quite a few in this case, but using those great details from the CISA alert, we can quickly narrow down to an example that appears to be and is directly relevant to the recently observed activity. So here we have a Sigma analytic named DISM remove online package. And if we pivot into the public Sigma repository and look at the detection logic field, we can see specifically what this analytic is designed to look at. And here we can see some specific executable strings as well as command line flags that are used to detect this type of activity. And we can see these actually directly match up with BianLan's implementation of this technique. But this is by no means the only example of a recognizable technique and implementation here in the recent alert. So one other thing that stood out to me was the registry modification technique. And looking at some specific implementations here, we can see that BianLan uses registry modification to allow a user to receive help from remote assistance. This, yet again, gives us some further details that we can start to look for further down in the commands appendix within the report. And here we can see a specific registry addition and setting of its value that BianLan was using. So let's follow the exact same workflow and pivot in Tidal Community Edition. We can look at modify registry. We have, again, a lot of Sigma analytics. But once again, we can very quickly find an instance that appears to be and is directly related to the activity reported about in the recent advisory. So we can click in again and see the registry set flag here in the log source, and then the actual detection logic that directly matches up with the activity that we're seeing discussed in this recent report. So here we're using the fallow to get help string and looking for that in the detection logic. So for our final example, and there are several others by the way, I wanted to look at BianLan's credential access activity and specifically its use of the LSAS memory technique. This is yet another technique that I know has a lot of different implementations in the wild, but oftentimes things that we can start to look for from a detection engineering standpoint. So following the exact same process, let's come down a little bit further into the report and we can see quite a large command line string associated with its implementation recently. So a couple things stand out to me here, and most notably the use of this com plus services DLL. This is going to be one of the details that we can use to pivot in and quickly find a detection analytic associated with this activity. So we'll come into the LSAS memory technique preview here in Tidal Community Edition. And yet once again, we have quite a few Sigma analytics, but we can start to narrow down and look for some of the specific indicators associated with the recent activity. So here we can see a rule titled process dump via run DLL 32 and com services DLL. And if we pivot in to the public Sigma repository and once again look at the detection logic field, we can start to see some of these exact strings and executables and a call out to the com services once again, which if we look back at the underlying report, we can see several of those detection strings directly match the command line provided in this report. So extremely helpful and ultimately getting us to the point of surfacing a directly relevant detection rule that we could consider using. Two quick final things that I wanted to note. First of all, a number of these detection analytics that we looked at, in fact, derive from Red Canary's Atomic Red Team unit testing repository. You can see this in the case of one of the RDP-related Sigma analytics. What this means is that you can now go and quickly and easily unit test your new detections directly in line with adversary intelligence to validate that they're in fact working as expected. And secondly, wanted to highlight, as we noticed in quite a few examples, there are many Sigma analytics associated with various technique implementations. This is a great reminder of procedural variance associated with MITRE attack techniques. What I think this does, having this all aggregated in Tidal Community Edition, is it gives you lots of ammunition to start thinking about procedural variation and potentially considering additional detections that you can deploy and implement associated with recent real-world activity, as well as variations on that activity. So thanks for watching, and we look forward to hearing more about how you're using Tidal Community Edition to support your threat-informed detection engineering efforts.